Today we summon the spirit of Nelson Mandela, a man who understood that the pursuit of freedom demands both immense courage and profound patience. Yet, Mandela speaks now not of South Africa's struggle, but from the vantage point of Armenia's Velvet Revolution, an emblem of non-violent resistance in the modern era. How does the language of peace craft the architecture of lasting change? What can Nikol Pashinyan's, Armenia's current Prime Minister's, journey teach us about the delicate interplay of power, humility and hope? And in a world where authoritarianism seems resurgent, where digital manipulation threatens truth itself, what timeless lessons can guide modern movements toward justice? From the streets of Yerevan to Republic Square, from the villages of Syunik to the diaspora communities of Los Angeles and Paris, the Armenian awakening reminds us that freedom is not a destination, but a continuous journey, one that requires both the wisdom of ages and the fresh eyes of youth. Mr. Mandela, your struggle against apartheid was arduous and often brutal. Yet, you chose reconciliation and peace over vengeance. What is it about nonviolence that makes it such a formidable force for change?
Nonviolence is the language of the oppressed who refuse to perpetuate cycles of violence. It demands a strength of spirit often overlooked, a willingness to confront injustice with unwavering dignity. It is not passivity, but an active refusal to degrade one's own humanity in the pursuit of freedom. Velvet revolutions embody this paradox: softness in method, yet iron in resolve.
Nikol Pashinyan emerged as a reluctant leader, yet his role became pivotal. How do you conceive leadership within such a moment of profound social transformation?
Leadership is a sacred trust, a covenant with the people. It is not the assertion of dominance, but an embodiment of collective will. True leaders listen more than they speak. They embody patience as much as passion. Pashinyan's rise is a testament to leadership born of the people, not imposed upon them.
But Mr. Mandela, how can nonviolence remain effective in a world where political power often responds with force? Isn't there a risk that peaceful movements become vulnerable to authoritarian crackdowns?
The strength of nonviolence lies not in its immunity to repression, but in its ability to expose the moral bankruptcy of oppressive systems. When Armenian citizens filled Republic Square with flowers rather than weapons, they revealed the true face of their struggle: dignity confronting corruption. Authoritarian force, when met with sustained peaceful resistance, eventually exposes its own weakness. The world watches, consciences are stirred, and even those in power begin to question the sustainability of their position.
What specific steps can Armenian civil society take to strengthen nonviolent resistance without losing momentum?
Armenian civil society must cultivate three pillars: education, organization, and spiritual resilience. Education means teaching citizens not just to protest, but to participate in local governance, civic institutions, and community building. Organization requires building networks that transcend political parties, connecting farmers in Syunik with intellectuals in Yerevan. And spiritual resilience? This means remembering that the Velvet Revolution was not merely about removing Serge Sargsyan, but about transforming the Armenian soul toward justice and transparency.
You mentioned reluctant leadership. What are the risks and rewards when a leader emerges as a Pashinyan did, seemingly unprepared for power?
Reluctant leaders often possess a humility that career politicians lack. Pashinyan's journey from journalist to revolutionary to prime minister reflects an authenticity that resonates with people tired of manufactured personas. The reward is genuine connection with popular will. The risk, however, is that good intentions without institutional wisdom can lead to missteps. A reluctant leader must surround himself with advisors who complement his passion with experience, his vision with pragmatic knowledge of governance.
How does the concept of moral authority translate from individual leaders to collective movements?
Moral authority cannot be claimed. It must be earned through consistent action aligned with declared values. In Armenia's case, the movement's moral authority came not from any single leader, but from the collective decision to remain peaceful despite provocation. When thousands of citizens chose dignity over vengeance, patience over immediate gratification, they created a moral force more powerful than any individual charisma. But this collective moral authority is fragile. It requires constant renewal through transparent governance, inclusive decision-making, and unwavering commitment to the principles that inspired the movement. Once lost, moral authority is nearly impossible to regain.
Can you speak to the role of symbols and rituals in nonviolent movements? The Armenian Revolution had its distinctive elements: the walking, the flowers, the music.
Symbols speak to the soul in ways that words cannot. The act of walking from Gyumri to Yerevan transformed a simple journey into a pilgrimage of national conscience. Flowers replaced fists. Music replaced marching orders. These symbols communicated to both supporters and opponents that this was not merely a political maneuver, but a spiritual awakening. Rituals of resistance create shared meaning and lasting memory. They bind participants together in common purpose and provide peaceful channels for powerful emotions. When people sing together, walk together, mourn together, they become more than a crowd. They become a community with shared values and shared destiny.
Mr. Mandela, a pressing issue currently shaking Armenia's social and political landscape involves the Armenian Apostolic Church. Prime Minister Pashinyan has publicly accused the leader of the church of violating the sacred oath of celibacy by fathering a child. He argues this breach disqualifies the church leader from his position and calls for new elections to restore justice. What would you say about such a call for accountability from a political leader toward a religious institution?
Justice is the bedrock of any society, and holding leaders accountable for their vows and conduct is vital to preserve trust and integrity. If the leader of the Armenian Apostolic Church has indeed broken the sacred celibacy oath, it is a matter that must be addressed openly and honestly. However, justice is not merely a swift demand for removal or punishment. It requires fairness, evidence, and a process that honors both truth and reconciliation. Prime Minister Pashinyan's fight for justice reflects courage and a desire to uphold moral standards. Yet, as leaders in moments of great tension, it is essential to balance firmness with compassion and to seek dialogue rather than division.
But Mr. Mandela, should political leaders have the authority to call for changes in religious leadership, or does this risk undermining institutional independence?
This touches the very heart of democratic governance, the delicate balance between accountability and autonomy. Political leaders have a responsibility to speak truth, even uncomfortable truth, when moral failures affect the nation's spiritual health. However, the mechanisms of accountability must respect institutional boundaries. Pashinyan's role is to raise the question, to demand transparency, to represent the people's concerns. But the resolution must come from within the church itself, through its own canonical processes. The danger lies not in speaking truth to religious power, but in assuming political authority over spiritual institutions. True democracy requires both courage to confront and wisdom to respect proper channels.
How might Armenia balance respect for its religious traditions with demands for accountability and transparency?
Armenia's identity is deeply intertwined with its Christian heritage. The Church has been the keeper of national memory through centuries of struggle. This sacred role demands the highest moral standards. Tradition is not diminished by accountability. It is strengthened by it. The path forward requires the Church to embrace transparency as a spiritual discipline. When religious leaders hold themselves to the same moral standards they preach, they honor tradition rather than betray it. The faithful deserve leaders whose lives reflect their teachings. Armenia can respect its religious heritage while insisting that its guardians live up to the sacred trust placed in them.
Can a leader's personal moral failings justify their removal from spiritual office, or should forgiveness and rehabilitation be prioritized?
Both justice and mercy are divine attributes. One without the other creates either cruelty or chaos. A spiritual leader who has broken sacred vows has wounded not only his own integrity, but the faith of those who look to him for guidance. Forgiveness does not mean avoiding consequences. True forgiveness often requires acknowledging the full weight of one's actions and accepting responsibility for restoration. In the Armenian context, this might mean the church leader acknowledging his failings, stepping aside to allow for proper spiritual healing, and perhaps, after genuine repentance and accountability, finding a new way to serve, though not necessarily in the same position of ultimate authority.
How might this controversy shape public trust in both political and religious institutions moving forward?
Crisis, when handled with wisdom, can become opportunity for renewal. If both institutions respond with transparency, humility, and genuine reform, public trust can actually be strengthened. Citizens often respect leaders who acknowledge failures and work to correct them, more than those who deny obvious problems. The Church must demonstrate that spiritual authority comes with spiritual accountability. The political leadership must show that calling for justice is not about political gain, but about moral standards that apply to all. If both institutions emerge from this controversy with greater integrity and transparency, Armenia's democracy will be stronger. If they retreat into defensiveness and mutual recrimination, both will lose the people's trust.
What does this controversy reveal about the relationship between sacred and secular authority in modern democracies?
It reveals the eternal tension between power and principle, between human fallibility and divine aspiration. In South Africa, we learned that no institution, political, religious, or cultural, is beyond the need for accountability. The sacred nature of religious authority does not exempt it from moral scrutiny. Rather, it demands even higher standards. Yet political leaders must approach religious institutions with respect for their unique role and their own processes of accountability. The goal should not be political control over religion, but a healthy relationship where both institutions serve the common good through mutual respect and constructive dialogue. This controversy will ultimately test Armenia's democratic maturity, its ability to address difficult questions without destroying the institutions that define its national identity.
Your struggle was deeply contextual to South Africa, but its echoes resound globally. How does the Armenian Revolution affirm the universal aspiration for freedom?
Freedom is not a singular monument, but a shared horizon. When Armenians rise with courage and conviction, they link themselves to a global continuum of human dignity. These moments transcend borders, because oppression anywhere diminishes liberty everywhere. The Velvet Revolution is a renewal of the human spirit's promise.
What role does youth play in this continuum of freedom struggles?
Youth are the custodians of tomorrow's conscience. Their restless idealism, tempered by wisdom, is essential. Yet, they must learn that the arc of justice bends not with haste, but with perseverance and strategic patience.
What specific lessons can Armenian activists draw from other global movements for freedom and dignity?
From India's independence movement, Armenians can learn the power of moral authority. Gandhi's Salt March was simple, yet profound, just as walking from Gyumri to Yerevan was both humble and transformative. From the American Civil Rights Movement, they can learn the importance of organization and sustained pressure. From Eastern Europe's peaceful revolutions, they can see how cultural identity and political freedom reinforce each other. But perhaps most importantly, from South Africa, they can learn that the hardest work begins after the protest ends. Building institutions, fostering reconciliation, creating economic opportunity, these are the unglamorous tasks that determine whether a revolution becomes lasting transformation or merely a change of faces.
How does Armenia's unique history shape the way freedom is understood and pursued today?
Armenia carries the weight of genocide, the pain of diaspora, the strength of survival. This history creates both opportunity and burden. The opportunity lies in understanding that freedom is precious because it has been lost before. Armenians know the cost of powerlessness, which gives urgency to the pursuit of self-determination. The burden is that historical trauma can make trust difficult. Trust in institutions, in neighbors, in the possibility of change. The Velvet Revolution represented a triumph over this historical cynicism. It said, "We can build something better, not just tear something down."
How can the Armenian diaspora contribute to the democratic transformation of the homeland?
The diaspora carries unique responsibilities and opportunities. They have experienced democracy in various forms: American federalism, French republicanism, Lebanese pluralism. This diverse experience can enrich Armenia's democratic development through shared knowledge and best practices. But the diaspora must approach this role with humility. Those who have lived abroad for generations cannot simply impose foreign models on Armenia's specific context. Instead, they should offer support, resources, and perspective while respecting the sovereignty of those who have remained and struggled in the homeland. The strongest contribution of the diaspora may be serving as bridges, connecting Armenia to global networks of civil society, business, and academic institutions. They can help Armenia learn from other societies' experiences while maintaining its own unique identity and path.
How can youth activism be nurtured to sustain Armenia's democratic future?
Young Armenians must be given real responsibility, not just symbolic positions. They should lead community projects, participate in local governance, engage with the diaspora. But they must also learn from their elders, the survivors who remember both oppression and resistance. Create mentorship programs that pair young activists with experienced leaders. Establish civic education that teaches not just rights, but responsibilities. Most importantly, give young people hope that their individual actions can contribute to collective change. A democracy thrives when each generation believes it can improve upon the work of those who came before.
What does the Armenian experience teach us about the relationship between national identity and democratic development?
Armenia demonstrates that strong national identity and democratic values can reinforce rather than contradict each other. The Velvet Revolution succeeded partly because it appealed to deep Armenian values: dignity, resilience, community solidarity. It showed that democracy is not a foreign import, but an expression of Armenian character at its best. However, national identity must be inclusive rather than exclusive. Armenian democracy must embrace all citizens, ethnic minorities, religious minorities, those with different political views. The challenge is maintaining cultural distinctiveness while building a civic identity that transcends ethnic boundaries. This balance is delicate but essential. Democracy requires shared civic values, but those values must be rooted in authentic national experience rather than imposed from outside.
Your embrace of forgiveness reshaped South Africa's path. What lessons can Armenia take from this ethos?
Forgiveness is an act of sovereignty over one's own soul. It is a radical form of power that frees the forgiver more than the forgiven. Healing is not forgetting transgressions, but transcending them to build a society where justice and mercy coexist. The Armenian people, too, must nurture this ethical balance to sustain peace.
Does forgiveness require courage?
Forgiveness is the greatest courage. It demands vulnerability and the strength to dismantle internalized hatred that can chain a people as surely as external oppression.
In contexts marked by political and social division, how can forgiveness become a tool for national healing in Armenia specifically?
Armenia faces divisions not just political but generational, regional, and ideological. Forgiveness begins with listening, really hearing why people supported the old system, understanding their fears about change. Many who opposed the Velvet Revolution were not corrupt but afraid of instability, of losing what little security they had. Forgiveness means creating space for former opponents to contribute to the new Armenia without losing face. It means acknowledging that some who served the old system did so out of necessity, not malice. But forgiveness is not naivety. It requires accountability, truth-telling, and genuine change of behavior.
What challenges do societies face when trying to practice forgiveness without compromising justice?
The greatest challenge is distinguishing between forgiveness and amnesia. Forgiveness remembers the past, but refuses to be imprisoned by it. Justice seeks accountability and restitution. The two must work together. Justice without forgiveness becomes vengeance. Forgiveness without justice becomes denial. In Armenia's context, this means holding corrupt officials accountable while also creating pathways for redemption. It means acknowledging historical injustices while not using them as excuses for present failures. It means forgiving individual enemies while still demanding systemic change.
How might Armenian leaders foster a culture of forgiveness while holding wrongdoers accountable?
Begin with confession, public acknowledgement of past mistakes by all parties. The old authorities must acknowledge their failures, but the new leadership must also acknowledge their own errors and overreach. Truth precedes reconciliation. Establish mechanisms for restorative justice. Not just punishment, but opportunities for those who have caused harm to make amends. Create public dialogues where different perspectives can be heard without fear of retribution. And most importantly, demonstrate forgiveness in small daily acts, in how political opponents treat each other, in how media covers dissent, in how citizens engage with those who disagree with them.
Can you speak to the role of memory in the process of forgiveness? How should societies remember painful chapters?
Memory is the foundation of both justice and reconciliation. We must remember not to perpetuate hatred, but to ensure that future generations understand the cost of injustice and the value of human dignity. In Armenia's case, this means creating honest historical narratives that acknowledge both suffering and resilience, both victimization and agency. Museums, memorials, and educational curricula should tell complete stories, not sanitized versions that ignore difficult truths or one-sided accounts that demonize entire groups.
How does personal forgiveness relate to collective forgiveness? Can individuals forgive when their society has not?
But personal forgiveness should not be demanded or expected, especially from those who have suffered greatly. Some wounds require time, some require justice, some require fundamental changes in the systems that enabled harm. Collective forgiveness is a longer process that requires institutional change, truth-telling, and genuine efforts at repair. It cannot be rushed or mandated. It emerges when enough individuals choose to prioritize shared future over past grievances, when institutions demonstrate real commitment to change, when society creates space for both accountability and mercy.
Velvet revolutions today unfold amidst a digital landscape vastly different from the past. How should leaders navigate the interplay of technology and freedom?
Technology is a double-edged sword. It can illuminate truths or distort them. The integrity of a revolution depends not on the tools, but on the values guiding their use. Leaders must cultivate digital literacy, safeguard against manipulation, and foster dialogue that transcends polarization. Ultimately, freedom thrives in spaces where human dignity is honored beyond algorithms and echo chambers.
Is the digital realm a new frontier for democratic vigilance?
Indeed, it demands renewed vigilance, a collective commitment to truth, and an ethical compass to navigate complex terrains of influence and power.
What are the biggest threats and opportunities that digital platforms pose to Armenia's democracy specifically?
The opportunity is unprecedented. Armenians in Yerevan can instantly connect with diaspora communities in Los Angeles, Paris, and Beirut. Social media allowed the Velvet Revolution to spread rapidly and peacefully. Digital platforms give voice to those previously silenced and create accountability through transparency. Disinformation campaigns can exploit Armenia's vulnerabilities, its geographic isolation, its complex relationship with neighbors, its internal divisions. False narratives can spread faster than truth. Foreign actors can manipulate public opinion without ever setting foot in Armenia. and social media can create echo chambers that deepen polarization rather than foster dialogue.
How can citizens and leaders promote truth and resist polarization in the age of social media?
Digital literacy is as important as traditional literacy in the 21st century. Armenians must learn to verify sources, question viral content, and seek multiple perspectives before forming opinions. Leaders must model responsible digital behavior, acknowledging when they're wrong, correcting misinformation, refusing to amplify divisive content for political gain. Create public media institutions that prioritize accuracy over speed, depth over sensation. Encourage face-to-face dialogue that humanizes political opponents. And remember that behind every social media profile is a human being with hopes, fears, and dignity deserving of respect.
How might Armenia's Velvet Revolution story be told and preserved in the digital age?
The story must be told by multiple voices, not just political leaders, but ordinary citizens. Not just those who supported the revolution, but those who had doubts. Not just success stories, but honest accounts of failures and setbacks. Create digital archives that preserve not just the dramatic moments, but the daily work of building democracy. Use technology to make this history accessible to future generations. Interactive timelines, virtual reality experiences of key events, oral history projects that capture diverse perspectives. But most importantly, ensure the story is told as a beginning, not an ending. The Velvet Revolution was not the achievement of democracy, but the beginning of the hard work of building it.
What role should regulation play in protecting democratic discourse online?
Regulation must walk a careful line between protecting free speech and preventing harm. The goal should not be censorship, but transparency, requiring platforms to disclose their algorithms, their funding sources, their content policies. Citizens have the right to know how information reaches them and who is trying to influence them. But the primary responsibility lies with citizens themselves. No regulation can substitute for critical thinking, media literacy, and civic engagement. The best defense against digital manipulation is an educated citizenry that values truth over convenience, dialogue over echo chambers, and human dignity over tribal loyalty.
How can traditional institutions adapt to the digital age while maintaining their essential functions?
Traditional institutions, parliaments, courts, churches, universities must embrace digital tools while maintaining their core values. This means using technology to increase transparency, accessibility, and participation, but not allowing digital metrics to override human judgment and moral reasoning. For Armenia specifically, this means creating digital platforms for civic engagement while maintaining face-to-face deliberation, using social media to increase government transparency while protecting sensitive national security information, embracing online education while preserving the irreplaceable value of human mentorship and community learning. The key is intentionality, using digital tools purposefully to strengthen democracy rather than simply adopting them because they exist.
Mr. Mandela, political freedom often requires economic empowerment. How does the Armenian Revolution address issues of economic justice and opportunity?
True freedom cannot exist alongside economic desperation. The Velvet Revolution succeeded partly because it promised not just political change, but economic opportunity. An end to corruption that stifled entrepreneurship, transparent governance that would attract investment, and policies that would benefit ordinary citizens rather than oligarchs. But economic transformation is more complex than political change. It requires building institutions, developing human capital, creating competitive markets, and fostering innovation. Armenia's challenge is ensuring that economic growth benefits all citizens, not just those with political connections.
What specific economic policies can support democratic consolidation in Armenia?
First, strengthen the rule of law. Investors and entrepreneurs need predictable, transparent legal frameworks. Courts must be independent and impartial. Property rights must be protected. Contracts must be enforceable. Second, Invest in education and innovation. Armenia's greatest resource is its human capital, a highly educated population with strong technical skills. Support universities, research institutions, and technology startups. Create pathways for young Armenians to build careers at home rather than emigrating. Third, diversify the economy. Reduce dependence on remittances and extractive industries. Develop manufacturing, services, and knowledge-based sectors. Support small and medium enterprises that create jobs and build middle-class prosperity.
How can Armenia balance economic development with social equity?
Economic growth without equity is ultimately unsustainable. It creates instability, resentment, and social fragmentation. Armenia must pursue what economists call inclusive growth, development that creates opportunities for all citizens, not just elites. This requires progressive taxation that funds public services, social safety nets that protect vulnerable populations, and active labor market policies that help workers adapt to changing economic conditions. It also requires combating monopolization and ensuring competitive markets where merit, not connections, determines success. Most importantly, it requires remembering that the goal of economic policy is human flourishing, not just statistical growth. An economy that produces impressive GDP numbers while leaving many citizens behind is not serving democratic values.
What role can the Armenian diaspora play in economic development?
The diaspora can be a bridge to global markets, a source of investment capital, and a reservoir of technical expertise. Many Armenian communities abroad have achieved remarkable economic success and can share knowledge, networks, and resources with the homeland. But this relationship must be reciprocal, not colonial. The diaspora should invest in Armenia's long-term development, not just extract resources or profits. They should support local entrepreneurs and institutions, not just their own businesses. And they should respect Armenia's sovereignty over its economic policies, even when they disagree with specific decisions. The strongest diaspora communities are those that maintain emotional and cultural connections to the homeland, while building genuine partnerships based on mutual respect and shared benefit.
Looking forward, how can the spirit of Velvet Revolutions endure in Armenia and beyond?
The revolution's promise lies in its capacity to inspire, but its peril rests in complacency. It must be sustained through institutions that reflect justice, education that fosters critical thinking, and communities bound by mutual respect. The Velvet Revolution is both a beginning and an ongoing act of stewardship.
What final counsel would you offer leaders like Pashinyan?
Lead with humility, embrace the complexities of freedom, and never forsake the power of collective hope. Remember, true leadership serves as a guardian of a people's dreams, not their master.
How can Armenia avoid the common pitfalls of post-revolution complacency or corruption?
Institutionalize the revolution's values. Don't just celebrate them. Create independent oversight bodies with real power. Establish term limits that prevent the concentration of power. Build a civil service based on merit, not political loyalty. And most importantly, maintain active citizenship. Democracy requires not just good leaders, but engaged citizens who hold leaders accountable. The greatest danger is believing that changing leaders changes everything. Systems, habits, and cultures change slowly. Vigilance must be sustained, not just for years, but for generations.
What institutional reforms are most urgent to safeguard the revolution's gains?
Judicial independence is paramount. Courts must be beyond political interference. Media freedom must be protected through law and practice. Electoral systems must ensure fair competition and genuine choice. Anti-corruption mechanisms must have teeth and transparency. But beyond formal institutions, Armenia needs what I call democratic habits. The daily practices of listening to opponents, compromising for the common good, and choosing transparency over secrecy. These habits cannot be legislated. They must be cultivated through example and experience.
How might the Armenian public remain engaged beyond protests and elections to deepen democratic culture.
Democracy is not a spectator sport. Citizens must participate in local governance, volunteer for community projects, engage with schools and neighborhoods. They must serve on juries, attend town halls, and hold peaceful dialogues with those who disagree with them. Create spaces for civic engagement beyond electoral politics, community gardens, cultural festivals, volunteer emergency services. When people work together on shared challenges, they build the social trust that democracy requires. The Velvet Revolution succeeded because Armenians rediscovered their capacity for collective action. That capacity must be nurtured and sustained.
What lessons does Armenians' experience hold for other societies struggling with authoritarianism?
Armenia demonstrates that even small nations can achieve remarkable democratic transformations through nonviolent means. It shows that citizens need not wait for perfect conditions or ideal leaders. They can create change through their own organized action and moral courage. But Armenia's experience also reveals the complexity of democratic consolidation. Revolution is often the easy part. Building lasting democratic institutions is the real challenge. Other societies can learn from both Armenia's successes and its ongoing struggles. Most importantly, Armenia proves that democracy is not a Western concept, but a universal human aspiration. When people have the opportunity to shape their own destiny through peaceful means, they will often choose freedom over security, hope over cynicism, justice over convenience.
How can international actors best support democratic movements without imposing their own agendas?
The most effective international support is patient, respectful, and responsive to local needs rather than external priorities. This means providing technical assistance when requested, sharing knowledge and best practices, offering economic opportunities that benefit ordinary citizens, and creating diplomatic space for democratic movements to succeed. But it also means restraining the impulse to micromanage or control. Each society must find its own path to democracy based on its unique history, culture, and circumstances. External actors can provide resources and encouragement, but they cannot substitute for indigenous leadership and grassroots commitment. The goal should be supporting local capacity rather than creating dependency, strengthening local institutions rather than bypassing them, and celebrating local achievements rather than claiming credit for them.
Many feel the quest for justice is a lifelong endeavor. What sustains hope?
Hope is the eternal ember within the human heart. It is fanned by courage, sustained by solidarity, and passed down through generations. The arc of history is long, but it bends toward justice only when fueled by persistent, principled action.
What personal and collective practices can sustain hope in times of political uncertainty?
On a personal level, Armenians must remember that they are part of a story larger than themselves, inheritors of ancient wisdom, participants in present struggles, ancestors to future generations. Daily acts of kindness, commitment to truth, and service to community sustain hope even when political systems fail. Collectively, create rituals that celebrate democratic values, not just Independence Day, but Democracy Day, moments when citizens gather to renew their commitment to shared governance. Tell stories of ordinary heroes, not just famous leaders. Build monuments to civic virtues, not just military victories.
How can each Armenian citizen contribute to bending the arc of history toward justice in their daily lives?
Start where you are, with what you have. Treat fellow citizens with dignity regardless of their political views. Speak truth in small settings, in family gatherings, workplace conversations, community meetings. Volunteer your skills for the common good. Mentor young people. Bridge divides between different communities. Remember that every great movement is built from countless small acts of courage and conscience. The Velvet Revolution succeeded not because of grand gestures, but because thousands of ordinary Armenians chose to act on their values. That same spirit, applied daily to the work of building democracy, can transform not just Armenia, but the world.
What would you say to those who feel overwhelmed by the magnitude of creating lasting change?
Change is not the responsibility of any single person or generation. It is a relay race where each runner carries the torch for their portion of the journey, then passes it to the next. Your task is not to solve every problem, but to faithfully run your portion of the race. Take inspiration from those who came before you, the survivors of genocide who preserved Armenian identity, the freedom fighters who resisted oppression, the ordinary citizens who chose to walk from Gyumri to Yerevan. Draw strength from those beside you, family members who share your commitment to justice, and invest hope in those who will come after you, children who will inherit the world you help create.
Any final thoughts on the legacy of the Velvet Revolution and its place in human history?
The Armenian Velvet Revolution reminds us that freedom is not a gift bestowed by the powerful, but a birthright claimed by the courageous. It demonstrates that small nations can achieve great transformations, that ordinary citizens can accomplish extraordinary things, and that the human spirit's desire for dignity and justice cannot be permanently suppressed. But perhaps most importantly, it teaches us that revolution is not an event, but a process, not a destination, but a journey. The work of building a just society never ends. Each generation must choose anew between freedom and security, between truth and comfort, between hope and cynicism. The Armenian people have chosen well. Their example illuminates the path for others who seek to transform their societies through nonviolent means, moral courage, and persistent hope.
Nelson Mandela's wisdom teaches us that peace, leadership, and freedom are intertwined in an eternal dance. The Armenian Velvet Revolution is a testament to what can be achieved when courage meets conscience, when ordinary citizens become extraordinary agents of change. As we have heard today, the work of democracy is never finished. It requires vigilance in each generation, wisdom in each decision, and hope in each heart. The Velvet Revolution was not an end, but a beginning, the first chapter in Armenia's ongoing story of democratic development. From the cobblestones of Republic Square to the villages of Syunik, from the diaspora communities of Los Angeles to the digital networks that connect Armenians worldwide, the flame of freedom burns brightly, but it requires constant tending, constant care, constant renewal. Carry this flame forward, dear listeners, and nurture it with wisdom and resolve. Remember that democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires your participation, your voice, your commitment to the common good. If you like this episode, subscribe, rate us, and share your thoughts. Join us next time for a dialogue with a great German philosopher known for his profound contribution to phenomenology, hermeneutics, and existentialism, Martin Heidegger, on being toward death in the selfie generation and upload fantasy. This has been Conversations with the Great Dead. Until we meet again, stay thoughtful and courageous, and remember that the arc of history bends towards justice only when we choose to bend it.